Певний ряд ці документи зараз будуть обміняні.
As part of the official visit of the Republic of Austria, a number of documents aimed at strengthening bilateral cooperation between our states have been signed in the presence of His Excellency, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. A ceremonial exchange of these documents will now take place.
Minister Beat Reiger and Minister Sibiha have signed two documents. The first is a memorandum outlining plans for Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction, and the second is a joint communique concerning the return of Ukrainian children from the Russian Federation.
The Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Andriy Sibiha, and the Federal Minister for European and International Affairs of the Republic of Austria, Beat Reiger, signed two documents today. The first is a declaration of intent on political cooperation and support for Ukraine's reconstruction. The second is a joint communique on the security and return of Ukrainian children unlawfully deported to the Russian Federation.
Bundesminister Norbert Tocznik und Landwirtschaftsminister Vitali Kowal haben ein Memorandum über Zusammenarbeit im Bereich Landwirtschaft unterschrieben.
Minister Tocznik and Minister Kowal have signed a cooperation agreement.
The Minister of Agrarian Policy and Food of Ukraine, Vitaly Kowal, and the Federal Minister for Agriculture, Forestry, Regions, Climate Action and Water Management of Austria, Norbert Tocznik, signed a memorandum on cooperation in the field of agriculture.
Landeshauptmann Thomas Stelzer und der Gouverneur der Region Odessa, Oleg Kipa, haben ein Memorandum zur Patenschaft Oberösterreich-Odessa.
The head of the Odessa Regional State Administration, Oleg Kipa, and the governor of the federal state of Upper Austria, Thomas Stelzer, signed a memorandum of understanding between the Odessa Regional State Administration and the federal state of Upper Austria.
Gemeindebundpräsident Johannes Pressel und die Leiterin des Kongresses der Kommunen und Regionen, Lilia Paschina, haben ein Memorandum zur Förderung der interregionalen und kommunalen.
The head of the Office of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities under the President of Ukraine, Lilia Paschina, and the President of the Association of Austrian Municipalities, Johann Pressel, signed a memorandum of understanding on the development of interregional and municipal cooperation.
Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit. Ich übergebe für den Beginn der Pressekonferenz.
Vielen Dank. Wir kommen zu den Pressestatements der beiden Präsidenten Zelenskyy und Van der Bellen und ich darf den Herrn Bundespräsident bitten zu beginnen.
Now, allow me to give the floor to Mr. President.
It is a great pleasure for me, Mr. President Zelenskyy, to welcome you to Austria on your official visit, together with your wife, who will remain in Vienna for a little longer and take part in the First Ladies and Gentlemen event. You already visited us in September of the year 2020. I remember that visit very well. You know, today, it feels as though that was in another life, as if from another world. Since February of the year 2022, Ukraine has been at war against Russian aggression. It is fighting for a fundamental goal, for something that here in Europe we take as entirely natural. The people of Ukraine do not want to become Russian subordinates. They are fighting for their freedom, for self-determination, and thus for the principles and foundations of our European order. The freedom of a country means that it has its own system of values and the right to choose those values independently. And I believe Ukraine has made it clear which system of values it has chosen: the rule of law, an open society, and democracy. And that must be protected against, in quotation marks, a system of values based on military aggression, violence against neighbors, and repression of those who think differently. Ukraine is waging this struggle not only for itself, but also for the whole of Europe, including for us. Mr. President, for this, I thank you sincerely, and I highly value the fact that you are here with us today. Austria and Ukraine have long been closely linked, going back to the time of the Habsburg monarchy. Bukovina and Galicia were parts of that monarchy, and one can find architectural heritage from that era in many places in western Ukraine. You surely know the images from Lviv or Chernivtsi. Looking at recent decades, we see a dense web of relations. Austria has traditionally remained a major economic partner and one of the largest investors. At the beginning of the Russian aggression in the year 2022, we ranked 6th among foreign investors. 200 Austrian companies are still permanently based and operating in Ukraine, and that should remain the case in the future as well. Unfortunately, during our discussions today, that was not the main topic. The subject, instead, was Russian aggression. And I want to reiterate here clearly and unambiguously that from the beginning of the Russian invasion in February of the year 2022, we stood firmly on the side of Ukraine and on the side of international law. Austria is a militarily neutral country, but not politically neutral. The return of war to Europe, with such cruelty, with daily images that are unbearable to see, and news that is unbearable to hear, the destruction and unimaginable suffering endured by Ukrainian men, women, and children, compel us to do everything possible to end this conflict. And Russia is unequivocally the aggressor. I again appeal to the authorities in the Kremlin to end this unlawful war and to begin serious, honest negotiations. Ukraine, Mr. President Zelenskyy assured us once again today, is ready for such negotiations. The international community, within the framework of the United Nations and the Peace Conference on Ukraine held in Bergenstock, Switzerland, in the year 2024, has also stood in favor of a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace for Ukraine. Such peace, however, cannot be achieved, without question, without taking into account Ukraine's security interests. What can we do here in Austria? Austria, within the framework of the European Union, from day one, has supported every effort aimed at assisting Ukraine. Austria participates in all sanctions against Russia, including the discussion of the 18th sanctions package. We are actively involved in all political, humanitarian, and financial measures. During today's meeting, as you have seen, several agreements were signed. Mr. President, there are approximately 70,000 Ukrainians who, due to Russia's invasion, have found refuge with us in Austria. They represent an especially important link between our countries. Many of them want to return to Ukraine at the earliest opportunity. Austria wants to help in this regard as well. That is why we appointed a government coordinator for Ukraine's recovery, Mr. Wolfgang Asting-Aruba, who is also present here today. We have no right to lose time, and we do not intend to. Mr. President, I want to assure you that Austria will make its appropriate contribution. In July, the next conference on Ukraine's recovery will take place in Rome. I hope it bears fruit. Mr. President, I once again thank you sincerely for your visit today. And I once again assure you that Austria stands on the side of Ukraine and supports its courageous and steadfast people.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It is an honor for me to be here today on this visit. Together with the First Lady, we are in Austria today. I thank you for all your kind words. I remember, this was one of my first visits. It was 5 years ago, a visit to Austria. I remember well that from that moment, our relationship became very close and very positive. I am grateful that, from the very beginning of the full-scale aggression, you have always supported Ukraine, Ukraine's absolutely just position in its struggle for independence. And I thank you for your support of the Ukrainian people. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, and all Austrians, we thank you for your hospitality and for supporting Ukraine, our sovereignty, and our people. Today, Olena and I are here together. This is our joint visit, and this level of visit reflects the full nature of relations between Ukraine and Austria, not only political, but genuinely warm and deeply human. First of all, I want to express our condolences, on behalf of all Ukrainians, regarding the tragedy in Graz. Nowhere and never should parents lose what is most precious, their children. And the pain of such a loss is something that nothing, not even time, can heal. And when we speak of this, we truly understand what that means. Unfortunately, Ukraine has been enduring this war for 4 years now, a full-scale war that continues to strike at our children, our Ukrainian children, and all of our people. We are doing everything possible to stop this war. The steps are entirely clear. First, a full and unconditional ceasefire, then genuine and honest diplomacy, and eventually guarantees of lasting security. At present, none of this is in place. And that is because of Russia alone. All of the world's efforts for peace are being undermined by Russia's unwillingness to end this war. That is precisely why strong, tangible pressure on Moscow is necessary, to stop the deaths, to stop the losses. This is exactly what we discussed today with Mr. President. And later today, we will also speak with the Chancellor of Austria about the urgent need for renewed and truly strong sanctions against Russia, sanctions that will push Moscow toward peace. The 18th package of European Union sanctions must be effective. It is also important to maintain those sanctions already in place, including the freezing of Russian assets. Of course, we also discussed the importance of supporting all collective efforts toward peace. We value Austria's willingness to provide meaningful mediation for talks with the Russian side. I briefed the President on the situation on the battlefield and the Russian strikes on our cities. I am grateful for your understanding and your willingness to help. We greatly count on Austria's support in the reconstruction of Ukraine. This work must be done, not just after the war, but now, to give more opportunities to our people, our cities, and our villages. This is already underway, including at the regional level, through cooperation between Ukrainian and Austrian communities. I want to thank you for that. At this time, for both me and the First Lady of Ukraine, a significant part of our visit is dedicated to the issue of Ukrainian children. Children and the community here in Austria, and also Austria's potential role in helping return Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. We are speaking about thousands of children currently in the Russian Federation, children who were forcibly taken from our temporarily occupied territories. We must bring them home, to Ukraine, to their loved ones, to their native culture. Today, agreements were signed between our countries precisely in these areas: security, political cooperation, and humanitarian matters. There are two more issues I would like to highlight. First, we count on the support of Austria, both the state and society. In a sensitive matter for Ukraine, the former Ukrainian officials and oligarchs who are evading Ukrainian justice and using Europe. Using Austria, undeniably, as a place to conceal their stolen assets. This is a matter of justice, especially during wartime. It is important for our nations to cooperate in the area of judicial affairs. And second, we count on Austria's support in matters concerning the entire European Union. For both of our countries, the European Union is of great importance. Ukraine has fulfilled everything that was required in the context of accession negotiations. And now, it is essential that the European Union demonstrate its ability to deliver on its promises. We would be grateful to Austria for supporting the approval of negotiation clusters and progress on Ukraine's path toward EU membership. Thank you again, Mr. President, for the invitation. It is an honor for me, and for my wife. Thank you very much. Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. President. We still have time for your questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Pavlo Kryslyaev from ORF. I represent the company ORF. I would like to begin my question with a comment made by the German Minister of Defense, Mr. Pistorius, who said that we must understand that support from the United States for Ukraine will gradually decrease over time. And the weapons that Ukraine needs for victory will also become less available. Today, Mr. President, Mr. Trump is in Canada. Please tell us, first, how do you feel about the possibility of reduced support from the United States? And second, what do you expect your meetings with President Trump will be like? Regarding President Trump and our visit to Austria, first of all, we are grateful to Germany. Indeed, they have provided strong support throughout the entire course of the war. Significant economic support, certainly, and military assistance, including production and air defense systems. For us, air defense remains one of the most critical challenges. And we are thankful for this. Throughout almost the entire period, we have maintained close contact with Minister Pistorius. He understands the situation, through the Ramstein platform, and through the unfortunately long experience of this war. He understands well that the United States supported Ukraine from the outset, very strongly. Especially at a time when European production was still at a low level. In terms of both timing and capability. Without that support from the United States, it would have been extremely difficult for us. I can hardly imagine how, and I would rather not imagine. We have faced many different challenges. And right now, no one wants to imagine what it would be like to survive and to fight for life, without support from the United States. At the same time, it must be said that the support we are talking about today refers to aid that had already been approved in previous years. We are not currently discussing new aid with the United States. In fact, one of the topics I plan to raise in my upcoming meeting with President Trump is a defense package that Ukraine is prepared to purchase. And we will discuss this in detail with him. I am confident that we will have this opportunity. Or at least, I am counting on it. I believe that Europe also needs to reflect on what Minister Pistorius said. I believe we all need to work to ensure that the alliance between the United States and Europe does not collapse. All of us have a vested interest in that alliance. Then, I believe, the continent will be relatively secure. And it will not be easy to threaten such an alliance, from any direction. Any direction. Anyone. Not only from Russia. That is why I believe everyone is invested in preserving this alliance. And so are we, very strongly. Very strongly. Because our future lies within the European Union. And if a question arises, or if complications occur in the military or defense partnership between Europe and the United States, then Europe will have to make a leap forward in developing its own defense industry. That will require enormous resources, and there is not much time.
All right, then let us proceed to the next questions.
I have a question for both speakers. First, to the President of Austria. Please tell us, the documents mention the reconstruction of certain regions. Which specific regions would you like to help rebuild? And in your opinion, which sanctions have already proven effective against Russia? What is Austria's position regarding the 18th package of sanctions? And to President Zelenskyy. Firstly, regarding children, it was mentioned that Austria might assist us in bringing children back. What role would you like Austria to play in this effort? Is it envisioned as part of a large-scale exchange, similar to prisoner swaps, including children as well? Or do you rather see Austria as a mediator? Is this a matter of returning the children or a matter of future peace negotiations? That is the first question. And the second, concerning the group of 7, what is your minimum objective and your maximum objective? Thank you.
Thank you. Austria has committed to taking part in this program for the recovery of Ukraine. But this also aligns with our economic interests. We briefly touched upon this topic today. For instance, we explored some interesting approaches between France and Switzerland, where a number of funds were established. Swiss and French companies are supporting Ukraine, and there are already several paths and ideas under consideration. I am glad that Mr. Wolfgang Uttengruber, the government coordinator, will be taking a closer look into regional cooperation. By the way, regarding the priorities at the regional level that you mentioned. Of course, our Ukrainian friends must also assist us in this endeavor. We will not be able to manage it alone.
Thank you. Concerning the children, we have an initiative, primarily regarding prisoners of war, and so this is impossible. We will not exchange him for anything. This is absolutely unjust. And, frankly speaking, excuse the expression, it is madness. It is, in fact, something the Russians have proposed. We give them soldiers, and they give us children. It is simply beyond reason and contrary to international law. But this is, essentially, their way of life. Therefore, the children must be returned. And that will likely require diplomacy, finesse, and bilateral relations between specific individuals and the Russians, whether leaders or representatives of particular states. That is why we involve so many countries, so many people of initiative are needed, each contributing as much as they can to return the thousands of children stolen by Russia, back home, to their families and loved ones. I thank once again the President, the government, his team, and all of Austria for taking part in these vital initiatives. As for the Group of Seven, it is very important to us what specific pressure we can all exert to stop Putin, to make him cease fire, to stop the war. We will be discussing frozen Russian assets with the leaders, and we will also talk about sanctions. I forgot to answer the question earlier, now I will respond. Regarding sanctions, we need sanctions on energy resources, first and foremost, oil produced in Russia. This is extremely necessary for us. And this, essentially, is a global issue. How long will partners continue to offer opportunities to the Russians before they respond decisively and firmly to every one of their strikes and every one of their killings, with sanctions and other methods?
Für die nächste Frage der Herr Korotki, bitte.
Наступне питання від пана Короткого.
Mr. President, Vasil Korotki, Ukrinform. Austria does not provide military support due to its neutral status, but it offers assistance in the humanitarian field, in the financial sphere, and also through joint European Union policies. I would like to ask you, how would you generally assess the support from Austria? Do you perhaps see areas or directions in which this cooperation and support for our country could be strengthened? Mr. President, I also have one more question. I ask the President whether Austria sees any other areas, activities, or directions in which it could offer greater assistance to Ukraine. We understand that Austria's neutral status does not always allow for full involvement, yet still, what additional possibilities does the President see?
Zur letzten Frage. Ich empfehle immer.
Always recommend reading the Austrian Federal Constitutional Law on Neutrality from the year 1955. It is very brief, it is very short. 3 sentences. Firstly, Austria does not enter into military alliances. Secondly, Austria does not permit foreign troops to be stationed on its territory for an extended period. And thirdly, we must provide for our own national defense. That last point, we have not taken it seriously over the past decades, but times have now changed. That is why we must rebuild this sector. And new investments should be directed there. And naturally, a neutral status does not prohibit us from defending ourselves against an enemy. Austria invests approximately 1% into this area. So we see that further potential exists, and we must expand it. But even if we wanted to help Ukraine militarily, we would not be able to. With what? We have neither tanks nor any such equipment. Austria does not possess such means. However, that does not prevent us from providing support in all other sectors and along all other lines of cooperation, whether in the field of medicine, or in supplying energy and electricity. For example, when I visited Ukraine, I remember we visited a school that had been completely destroyed by Russian forces. Austria provided assistance, and that school was rebuilt and is once again operational. Or, for instance, the provision of batteries or generators, likewise, support by Austrian independent non-governmental organizations. All of this is entirely compatible with our neutrality.
Excuse me, what was the question again? Yes, I believe I partially answered it already. So, humanitarian assistance is of great importance. We already spoke today about children. First of all, I believe there will be a very positive decision by the First Lady regarding Austria's support for the construction of bomb shelters for our schools. You know how important it is that children are able to attend school, and a school can only operate when it is equipped with proper bomb shelters. That is vital. I also wish to thank Austria for its financial assistance and its support in strengthening Ukraine's energy system. This is crucial. There are certain things that, at first glance, perhaps were not fully understood in terms of their importance. But later, in time, you come to realize that Austria's consistent stance in sanctions policy, its commitment to supporting Ukraine's future in the European Union, its openness to establishing cooperation clusters, all of these are present, and all of them, 100%, reflect Austria's truly friendly position toward Ukraine. And for us, that is extremely important.
Thank you very much. The final question, please. The final question will come from Mr. Zawadzki.
Mr. President, as you know, in Austria, a large portion of the population takes great pride in the country's neutrality. What is your view on neutrality as a concept in general, and with regard to Ukraine in particular? I am the President of Ukraine, and if you do not mind, I will speak about my view on Ukraine's neutrality. Back in the year 2014, Ukraine held a non-aligned status. I once expressed my opinion on this matter, and I believe it is very clear how it ended. It ended with the outbreak of war. With the occupation of the Crimean Peninsula and the occupation of part of eastern Ukraine, namely, portions of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. And this was despite our non-aligned status. So it cannot be said that we were attacked because we belong to this or that alliance. That is a misleading narrative. What we lacked was clarity. Our army lacked sufficient strength. And I believe our leaders lacked sufficient leadership. That is my personal opinion. Europe, too, lacked unity at the time. And I believe that all of this, everything I have just described, we can no longer afford to lose. We want the war to end, but not on ultimatums, and certainly not at the expense of Ukraine's independence.
And with that, we come to the conclusion of our press conference.
І ми дійшли до завершення нашої прес-конференції. Пан президент Зеленський, пан Вендер, окей, він вже не слухає. Er hört mich nicht mehr.